Good morning, everyone. I'm Jocelyn Boyd, and I'm employed by the Public Service Commission. Thank you for those of you who are participating in person today and also virtually. We are here today because of order number 2023-481. And if you recall, the commission started in 2020 with a 5-year review of its pending or current, rather, regulations. And the commission staff at the time proposed some minimum filing requirements that included proposed performance indices. The commission disposed of that issue in order number 2023-481 on page 19. And the commission basically stated, based on participant input, the commission, and I'm paraphrasing what the commission did, basically instructed the commission staff to conduct workshops regarding proposed performance indices, and the commission removed the performance indices from the minimum filing requirement schedules, along with existing filing requirements. Okay? So, the clerk's office on February 14th of 2025 issued a notice of workshop for performance indices for water and wastewater utilities, and that notice is posted in docket number 2025-64. Basically, the public was informed in the notice issued on February 14th that separate workshops would be conducted for each utility type: water, wastewater, gas, and electric utilities, regarding relevant performance indices. And on the second page of the notice, you'll notice where proposed topics, which were not all inclusive, are included. There are 4 proposed topics that are listed. There's a paragraph that also reads at the top of the notice of the second page. This stakeholder process represents a collaborative approach to this discussion regarding proposed performance indices or performance indices. And we basically asked interested persons to file written comments, or first their intent to participate in today's workshop by a certain date, and any written comments by a certain date. So at this time, we'll see who's present, those interested stakeholders who are present. We'll begin with the Office of Regulatory Staff.
Good morning, Ms. Boyd. My name is Stig Rasmussen. I'm here representing the Office of Regulatory Staff. I'm joined today by Chad Torrey,
Yes.
who will be participating virtually.
Yes. Good morning, Mr. Rasmussen. Is that the way you pronounce your name? Nice to see you. Nice to meet you. And good morning, Mr. Torrey. What about
Good morning, Jocelyn.
Good morning. What about the South Carolina Department of Consumer Affairs?
Hi, good morning, Jocelyn. Roger Hall on behalf of the department.
Good morning. How are you doing this morning?
Doing great. Hope you are too.
Doing fine, thank you. And Nexus Water Group? Okay. Okay. Lauren Hudson. Okay. All right. Nice to see all of you. Thank you for participating. So if you weren't aware before today, the commission is fortunate to have a Department of Energy fellow who's been working on our studying and guiding us through this process for the proposed performance indices workshop. His name is Derek Jones, and Derek will be leading our discussion today. So I'm going to turn the microphone over to Derek at this point.
Morning, everybody. As Jocelyn said, my name is Derek Jones, and I am a Department of Energy Innovator Fellow. Just to clarify what that means, it is a fellowship program sponsored by Department of Energy that sends fellows across host institutions across the nation, so that's utility commissions, energy offices, that sort of thing. I do not work for or represent any views of the Federal Department of Energy. I work here 40 hours a week as a member of the PSC's technical advisory team. And as Jocelyn said, a lot of my work is focused on the performance indice workshop, research and design. So that's why we're here today, as a result of the order that was recounted to you guys. Does anyone have any questions about me or my position or what I've done or anything like that?
Love to hear a little bit more about you. Where are you from?
I
Who's
am
your
from
family?
Richmond, Virginia. Yeah, so not too far, but yeah, went to grad school for energy policy. Interned at a couple utilities during that time, and then this is my first job post grad school. So happy to be here.
Welcome.
Thank you. Well, so with that, I want to start the discussion off, I think, by letting you, Mr. Torini, or give you the opportunity, if you wanted, since you were the party that submitted comments for the workshop, if you wanted to elaborate on any of those or get anything off your chest that you didn't in your comments, now would be a great time to do that.
Well, I don't think you want me to get things off my chest, but no, the Nexus Water Groups, first of all, want to thank the commission for the opportunity to be here and participate in this workshop. When performance metrics came up a few years ago, this is what we suggested needed to happen. And I think there was wide agreement between ORS, DCA on that as well, that we should have some sort of a discussion that could arrive at indices if we need them and how to do them. We began our comments by just reference to the Constitution and the statutes, which prescribe that utilities provide adequate and proper service to their customers, and that obviously can mean a lot of things. In rate cases, as a practical matter, service quality always comes up, sometimes in a more organized fashion than others, and so maybe this is an opportunity to organize that information. But the main thing that we would like to stress, without just repeating our comments here, is we think these determinations of performance metrics and the appropriate performance metrics and the benchmarks for them need to be made on a utility-specific basis. What may be good, for instance, we have 5 utilities, I believe it's 5, but what may be good for Kiowa Island Utility may not be the most appropriate measure for Harbor Island Utility. Utilities with different sizes, different challenges, and different resources as well. One of the categories the commission mentioned in their notice was affordability. And to us, I think that translates really into cost effectiveness, because one of the things that needs to be measured is if the commission wants a certain service standard, we also need to take into consideration what it's going to cost and what the impact will be on customers ultimately. So we would encourage the commission, if it decides to promulgate these performance metrics, to set them ideally in rate cases on a utility-specific basis that allows a utility the resources and the ability to meet whatever measurements or measures of success the commission would like. And I'll just leave it at that. I'm certainly delighted to, and Nanette is as well, and she'll jump in to just talk about it today, because we'd like to hear what the commission has in mind. You've obviously been working on this for a while, and what your thoughts are on it.
Yeah, no, thanks for that. I have some questions going off that I'd love to ask you guys, and then after that I'll circulate around to the other parties so everybody can say what they want to say. So y'all made it clear that you think this should really be this is really a matter for rate cases. So are you, I guess if you were to suggest like procedurally how it would be done, do you think that the setting and picking of these utility performance indices, like on a utility by utility basis, like, are you saying we would do that as part, like during a rate case, or would there be some other proceeding for that? Because we agree, obviously, there has to be due process and thoughtful consideration and that sort of thing. But the thought of having like a proceeding for each and every utility to do performance indices, could be a lot. So, I just wanted to get your thoughts there and how maybe that would be done. And we're very introductory on this, by the way. We don't necessarily have a plan.
I think it kind of, one question I had, and I mentioned it to Charlie early on, is, using that term performance indices is a pretty broad term. Are you looking at like service quality? Like when I think of, speed to answer a customer's call, or, are you looking more like at service quality measurements, or are you looking at more, as Charlie was going down the path of more like operational efficiency, if you're going to require certain things of a utility, there could be capital expenditures required for them to achieve whatever that performance index is. Do you guys have kind of an idea of what you're thinking of that you could share?
Yeah, definitely. I think I'll give you the short answer now, and then as part of this discussion, I want to get into that very topic later. But I think the short answer is any of those could be in play. Like there could be multiple sort of categories of indices, whether that be operational or more on the engineering side or customer service side. Now we don't have, like, again, this is very introductory, and the point of this workshop is to collaborate, determine what's feasible and what would be appropriate under the state's energy policy goals and regulations, many of which you cited in your comments. So I think, yes, there could be multiple types potentially, but that is still an open discussion at the moment, and we will talk more about that during the workshop too. So I want to pivot a little bit to your comments. This is your last paragraph on the first question in your comments. The paragraph that begins with, the commission must determine a suitable reporting period for the performance indices. And so at the end of that paragraph, you say data from just one quarter or year would offer a limited view and would not be sufficiently informative. Yeah, I wondered if we could talk about that maybe a little bit, because I think it definitely makes sense that, data points without enough historical context would be, maybe not so useful. But at the same time, there may be value to, if a trend exists, it may need to be observed with that sort of regular data collection potentially. So I'm wondering, if given the goals of regulation, and if we're trying to observe whatever performance index it may be, how would it be valuable enough if it was only in rate cases, which of course occur at different times for different utilities and can sometimes have multiple years between them? Do you think that would offer enough of a trend potentially to make this a valuable endeavor? Or, me and staff have talked about the annual reports that you also mentioned that could potentially, in our mind, be a suitable place to sort of tack these things on. It's like it's already getting filed here at the commission, and it could just be tacked right on at the end. So, what's your take on that? Maybe what do you think might be the best? Well, I know you guys think rate cases would be the best approach, but do you have any other opinions on what I just said?
I don't want you to think we're dug in. I mean, our point in that sentence was a snapshot in time on data is not going to tell the whole story, right? So a rate case by statute has to be at least 1 year out, and as a practical matter, you'll get a fairly good interval for many utilities. So we thought that would be a good place for reviewing them. Also, when you talk about setting the measures, if we're going to do it on a utility by utility basis, it doesn't seem very efficient to start having proceedings for every water and wastewater utility in the state to establish their performance measures. So that's why it seemed like a convenient place to do it. Another thing you might consider is you really want to do this with Class B and Class C utilities? Or should it be something, I mean, we're Class A's for the most part, but should it be something for the Class A's, which makes it a little more manageable? At a certain point, you take these little utilities and you're just going to overwhelm them with reporting requirements.
Right, and that's certainly a consideration and something that we don't want, is to overwhelm some of these extremely small water utilities with advanced reporting requirements.
What you put on the annual report wouldn't be one. Yeah, Lauren makes a point, it wouldn't be utility specific, but if there are some generic measurements we can put on there, I think at that point it just becomes a cost efficiency decision. I just would urge the commission to keep in mind that anything, we're not opposing it, but anything we do is going to end up costing money, which is eventually going to be recovered in rates.
Understood.
So if the reporting requirements are easy to meet, we don't really have an issue with that, do we?
No, and I think it kind of does go back to, what data points are we looking to
Yeah.
collect? I think at a most germane point, if you said, hey, here are 4 measures, and as Charlie and Lauren are talking about, it's very different to have Goat Island, which I don't even know if Goat Island is still anymore, but you could have real disparate levels of ability between different sized utilities. So that's why I kind of go to, if it's service quality measures, there you do have ORS that does their review. But I was, that's not me.
Sorry, no.
You need a minute?
I'm sorry, no. I need for you two to get closer to the mic.
Oh, is that what it is?
My trying to adjust to
see.
for it to be loud enough for me to hear has overwhelmed everything.
I'm sorry.
I
Let me get close.
apologize.
That's why I was trying to ascertain, like, if it was like, service quality measures, like that are customer related, are those something? And you mentioned tagging on those to the annual report, especially if a utility is already tracking them. I don't know that that's that difficult. But if you go down a further path and you say, okay, like, and we dealt with this when I was at ORS, water loss. That came up several times in some rate cases, tracking water loss, what's the level. If you have more along those lines, then, typically what we have done, candidly, is pick up certain issues in a rate case, and then whether it was billing issues or whatever, out of that rate case, you would have had some reporting requirements that maybe came out, either that or out of a complaint case.
I think that makes a lot of sense. And also, if you've got, as we pointed out, you've already got some reporting going on. Maybe you could consolidate the reporting that's taking place in these dockets that are kind of scattered all over the place into the annual reports. Maybe that would help. We're not trying to be evasive. We're just kind of feel like we're grappling a little bit with what the commission's looking for as
Right.
well. And I should add, we're going to have to talk to our client when all this is done. But we want to have this conversation as freely as possible.
Yeah, and so do we. This is meant to be a collaborative workshop, and there will be other workshops. Yeah, I mean, we don't have a proposed list that we're like, we want to put this in regs right now. We want to hear from you guys before we do something like that, because we want it to be feasible and beneficial. And I do want to highlight too, I mean, I think sometimes these performance measures can be characterized as just like a really negative thing, but I wouldn't say that. I mean, I think that it's a great opportunity for well-performing utilities to highlight that to the commission also. So that's just something I would keep in mind. Do you have anything? Cool. All right, well, thank you for answering my questions about your comments. I want to give some other parties the opportunity to speak. So would anybody from DCA like to say anything about any of the topics that we've discussed so far?
Sure, I appreciate it. We were trying to look back over everything here to, was reminded of sort of the long history of the reg reviews, and again, commend the commission for the job they did on those. Looking back through the regulations, I did notice, and I don't know that it was mentioned in Charlie's filings or the directive, but it does appear that there are a lot of commission regulations that already exist that sort of touch on these points, at least. Just kind of rattling off a few. There are this is all in 103, so like 550 and 750 that address water versus wastewater. But they're, good engineering practices. 570 and 770 that address quality of service. 571 and 771 that address interruptions of service. There's another 782 for safety programs. I think there's also some a little bit more technical, like pressure limits in, let's see, I have to look at my notes, 773 and maybe 774. So I guess my point being that there are some things in regulations that not sure if they have the specificity the commission is looking for, but at least sort of touch points, I guess, on performance measures for utilities. And I guess maybe one thought might be to whether it's a minimum filing requirement, or it's in the annual reports, which I thought was a good idea as well, just to maybe direct utilities to address those regulations. And again, being an attorney, not an engineer, maybe not understanding all the technical components of those regulations and practices, but it could be at least like a better word, maybe a generic way to address performance indices under existing commission regulations. But otherwise, that's all I really have right now. Enjoying the conversation and appreciate the opportunity to provide feedback.
Yeah, thanks for that. That is something that we'll definitely look into, those regs that you mentioned. And I think, yeah, from staff's perspective, it can be, as Mr. Torini said, it can sometimes feel like we're wrangling data from a bunch of different sources at times. So it could be, I'm interested in the idea that you just said about kind of maybe consolidating things that already exist, and just making it a little bit more palatable for us. 'Cause, small staff, we have limited bandwidth, so that there could be value in that. So thank you for that suggestion. Ores, would you like to say anything?
I have no comments unless my colleague Chad Torrey does online.
No, and thank you again for the opportunity. We, frankly, in this setting, we're more in kind of an observation mode, but appreciate taking in all of everyone's comments. So thank you.
Well, thank y'all. So with that, I will move on to try to. The goal here is to sort of, Nanette, as you had mentioned, kind of discuss specific indices and just field general thoughts about them. Now, to be clear, these are not us proposing these indices or anything. I just have these examples so that we can all sort of look at the same thing and hopefully have a discussion. And we picked these deliberately. These are the handouts you should have. The first one is right here. This is back from docket 2020-247A, which is the initial docket of those 5-year reg reviews that were introduced by Jocelyn, where the performance indices idea was originally sort of proposed. So, this is in the past. This docket is sort of over and done with at this point, but the reason that we have this here is just to show you things that you have already seen before, and we can talk about them. So if you remember in that proceeding, staff had identified, based on DCA's comments, both Florida and Arkansas's minimum filing requirements for rate cases, and they asked the parties to identify which they preferred out of those sets of minimum filing requirements as sort of an exercise. So that's what number 2 is right there. It's showing the Arkansas MFRs that were discussed and ultimately, of course, not adopted. And I will put those on the doc cam in a minute. And staff also proposed on number 3 some of their own categories of MFRs, and this is what I meant when I said that we'll kind of touch on it later. So again, this is not any sort of official, us proposing these right now. It's more just to field comments. I do think there's value in sort of speaking on a little bit more specific level about some of these performance indices. So, not to put you on the spot or anything, but if anybody has any thoughts about number 3 here, it would certainly be helpful for us, so that way we don't have to make assumptions about what you might think, that sort of thing.
Find where we are. You said number 3, is that the paragraph begins in addition to these modifications?
Yes. In addition to these modifications, the commission staff proposes including the following requirements.
Well, most of them wouldn't apply to, or many of them wouldn't apply to us. I mean, we have gas stores scheduled.
Right, and so this docket did include the other utilities too. So again, this is just an example, and some of them may not apply to the water sector.
I mean, I think it gets to, what are we trying to get at? I mean, I don't know that senior executive compensate, I don't see how, just candidly, I don't understand. I mean, either we're paying a just and reasonable salary or not. I mean, analysis of salaries and wages, I don't really recall that schedule. Going back, I will point out, Arkansas had these MFRs, but if I recall correctly, Arkansas, I believe, had one regulated water utility. So it's not like they were really implemented much. Cost of capital, credit watch history, credit rating reports, again, I mean, cost of capital is relevant in a rate case. I don't know where it, first of all, it may be difficult to report these things. I don't know. Lauren would know better than I do. But secondly, I'm not sure what use they are, frankly. Then we get customers per employee, customers per mile of distribution line. Customer satisfaction is something that, for instance, Blue Granite reports on now. So I can see number of complaints, location of complaints, complaint resolution. Those are all things that, those are metrics ORS would have that we could report, that kind of thing. And that at least some of our utilities are already being done. I don't really know, without context, what we learn from customers per employee or customers per mile of distribution or revenue per employee. I mean, different systems are going to have different revenue requirements, and I'm not sure. I'm just not sure what to do with these.
Okay.
I guess my question is, what would y'all do with them? I don't really.
Yeah, I think for us, it's that it would offer a bit more transparency and consistency in some of these metrics, beyond potentially the scope of a rate case. Like, again, those can be many years apart at times. And for transparency for us and also anyone else that comes to the commission, and looks at things that are filed, it could offer some transparency into some of these metrics and trends over time. I do want to be clear that I agree with you that, the water utilities are quite different. Their systems are different. They have different needs and requirements. But I do think that, in the context of a given system, there may be value in looking at sort of historical trends related to some of these operational metrics, just to ensure efficiency. And again, this is all grounded in the statute, like what is our requirement here. So,
Well, I see SCDCA requested the cost of capital items. Roger, do you have some insight on this?
We can't hear you. I think you're muted.
Sorry about that. Yeah, Charlie, I may have missed the exact question, but my recollection from our prior comments was more driven towards the sort of financial components of a rate case. So yeah, the cost of capital additions. Actually, I was sitting here trying to pull up the prior comments in the Arkansas MFRs, but I guess maybe what was the exact question, Charlie?
Well, I just noted that in 3E, the cost of capital items were listed as requested by SCDCA, and I was just wondering, maybe you could expound on that. One thing that jumps out at me is I don't think any of these would be at the regulated utility level. So there may be some jurisdictional issues, but
I guess I'll apologize. I don't think I have the same handout you all do, and again, sorry for not being there in person. But
I'm sorry, you don't. He may not
does
have
Roger
this. Does he have this?
I do not know, actually. Yeah,
I do recall. I do recall we, suggesting some minimum filing requirements and suggesting Arkansas as one of the potential states to be used. But I think that was, again, going off memory here, and I'll be happy to look at any additional documents, was kind of more directly related to let's making sure we're getting the same information from different utilities and trying to avoid, wasting a lot of time in discovery for the things that people ask for in every rate case.
But those are part of the MFRs. Okay, I see what you're saying.
Well, so if you could expand on that point, actually, the same information from different utilities, because that doesn't sound necessarily like what we've talked about today, which is kind of different information from each utility. So are you suggesting,
Well, where I was, sorry.
No, go
where
ahead,
I was
please.
Was more from a, thinking of it from a financial review, not so much performance indices. I guess if that makes sense. So I feel like, the types of information we're getting, whether it's, various expenditures or, again, cost of capital related items, those I think are typically going to be the same. I kind of agree with Charlie based on the types of systems and number of customers and things like that. From a performance standpoint, those may vary. I mean, obviously, right, they might be the categories. Again, not being a water or wastewater operator or an engineer, the sort of the categories of things you would look at would be the same, but is the metric the same for each utility? I don't know. I don't want to take my comments as saying one way or another.
Roger, do you think your need for the financial information was already dealt with in the MFRs that were promulgated for rate cases?
Charlie, to be honest, I haven't looked at them in a while, but I recall at the time we haven't had a water rate case in a while, Right?
Well, that may change.
Yeah. But I mean, I feel like they were addressed. I mean, those things were included. Again, in preparation for this workshop, didn't sort of pull those back up to see what was added. And I see from Commission Order from 2023-481 that a large majority of those, I believe, are still there. Right. This is, if I'm correct, this workshop is sort of focused on that removal of Schedule A17, maybe performance indices as ordered by the Commission. So to answer Charlie's questions, yeah, I do feel like most of the sort of financial aspects were addressed.
Okay, thanks for clarifying.
I have a comment on these.
Please, yeah.
This is Lauren Hudson. I guess some of these seem less like performance indices, the number 3. I think we mentioned in our comments, we feel that this could be an opportunity to sort of maybe motivate or help utilities maintain and improve performance. So how would you establish sort of a benchmark of what would be good? What level?
I think that really is the central question, and part of it is that it's hard to do that on our side if we're only, if the information that we receive is sort of scattered across different dockets and is also not very consistent in its timing. It can be hard to kind of analyze that, and we talked about, one data point in time isn't necessarily useful because you don't know how that is in relation to the past. So I think that what you just identified is one of our central questions and would be one of the goals here would be to get more maybe visibility and insight, I guess, just, to be able to more effectively regulate.
And another issue for the water and wastewater side of it is we're the only ones here, because I think that we would be comparing ourselves, I guess, to ourselves unless you're looking in other jurisdictions also, so.
Well, that does bring up a question. I don't know if any of the Nexus utilities are in multiple jurisdictions, but it would be interesting if they are, if anything like this happens in those other jurisdictions. I know, like in the electric side of this, Duke Energy, they do things like this kind of in North Carolina, and so in our state, that was a consideration, is that like half of their company is basically already doing that. So are there any water utilities that you know of that may have a similar circumstance?
There's some reporting in North Carolina that goes along with the North Carolina version of a Rate Stabilization Act, which, by the way, Nexus would be very interested in pursuing, in which performance indices are reported. First of all, they're set on an individual utility basis, and the commission tracks them on an individual basis. They've set certain measures as what they call tracking measures, and then other measures as, I don't remember the operative term, but basically measures for which the commission would either award, say, 10 basis points of ROE in excess of their approved ROE, or subtract 10 basis points. And again, these things are set at the beginning and then at the end, but they're part of North Carolina's Rate Stabilization Act schedule. So it's kind of different, and I don't know that there's been a rate case on them. These are very recent, it's a couple of years.
Okay.
There may be performance measures in other jurisdictions that I'm not familiar with. But.
Right. No, that's helpful though to know what they're doing in North Carolina. And yeah, that is that's a much more notable change. It sounds like in there, the way that they set rates and incentivize it, but definitely interesting. So thank you for that.
Well, I mean, we would say, that might be something the commission, I know an RSA is probably beyond your scope, but, the commission, I think, has the authority to promulgate a system improvement charge. And that may be something you tie into performance measures if you decide to go down that route.
Yeah, thank you for that. Anyone else want to comment on these? I have another handout that we can look at that gets a little less financial and more performance-y.
I do have and that may be where you're going. I looked ahead to it looks like, A through E is more, some of it's related to gas and financial, but then you have F, performance and operational metrics. And then I flipped the page, and there's 2 pages. Is that where you're heading next? Those 2 pages?
I'm headed to this page here.
Could I ask a question about these 2 pages? Are these also from Arkansas as well? And is that, I mean, to me.
Are you referring to the page that's up here on the doc cam right now? Or I think for you it will be there.
It's the one up at the top. It says Section 8, Appendix 8-1.
Yes. Yeah, so that's what I was going to.
Okay.
And yeah, to answer your question, so these are a couple schedules that are pulled from the Arkansas schedules. It's not all of the ones that were discussed in the previous dockets. We just wanted to pull a couple of examples again, just to facilitate a discussion on them. But yeah, so this is Schedule E12 of the Arkansas minimum filing requirements, and then on the other side of the page is Schedule E13, also from the Arkansas minimum filing requirements. So yeah, and we really just wanted to, just like the last handout, see if anybody has any thoughts about these. Again, these are, especially E12, are a bit more like actual water system performance type of measures compared to the finance side of things.
By the way, the internet, I don't know about anybody else, it doesn't seem to be working.
said the internet's not working?
I just pulled it up on my hotspot finally, but so we may be a little slow.
No, that's fine. I mean, got all the time in the world here.
I'm not as familiar with Arkansas really at all, so I hadn't. All of this is new to me. I'm just kind of going through it. Could we just walk through like what these are discussing? Like the first one says pumping capacity, GPM or other suitable unit measure. Is this what Arkansas water utilities are using now? And
Yes.
okay. And
Yes.
would you mind just kind of let's walk through the 10 of them?
Sure. Yeah, actually, John, do you mind if I turn that over to you, our staff accountant?
Sure.
He'll be able to offer a more nuanced view of these things.
Yeah, so I think these are Arkansas's attempt to, just increase transparency and the operational, capacity of the water and wastewater companies. Could you repeat the question?
Well, I was just wanting to know and understand in terms of where you guys are looking to, finished water storage by tank, water demand, most recent report from insurance service offices. I was just wondering if we could walk through. I mean, some of these number of revenue by rate schedule, I know in a rate case we do, obviously look at revenue that's brought in over a historical period. But I was just wondering what specific about these measures you guys would find helpful. Like I said, the most recent report from insurance service offices, is that to kind of tell you if there isn't enough public fire protection, or what exactly? I guess I'm not articulating it well, but I'm trying to figure out what gets you the information that you need about out of these 10 items.
Yeah, so I think if performance metrics were to be, say, broadcast publicly for anybody to see, these are certain things that are very individual to water and wastewater companies that I think you could broadcast or show that anybody could have access to. The pumping capacity. Not if you have an individual ratepayer, legislator, somebody from the news who doesn't follow water and wastewater issues every day. They have no idea what the individual statistics are of these water and wastewater companies, right? So I think if we were going to go down this route, having the ability to see the individual statistics of every water and wastewater company would be beneficial to the public.
I mean, I just went back and looked at our comments from 2021 and refreshed my memory a little bit about Arkansas. There were a couple of things that first of all, I don't know. I don't know that what anybody's going to do with the pumping capacity of a utility. I mean, as a customer, I'm not sure. But beyond that, one of the things, just to deal with Arkansas in the context of Arkansas, I think it's worth keeping in mind that the Arkansas PSC is organized the way our PSC was organized before 2004. It's a unitary commission. And so the Arkansas PSC has commission staff, and regulatory staff all under one roof. So these reporting requirements that are as much for their regulatory staff to use and make that for one reason or another have decided they need to know the pumping capacity of a utility, and then to use it in their oversight of the utility, and then maybe to bring it, and I quote from their website, to for its experts to present recommendations to the commission through pre-file testimony and oral testimony subject to cross-examination during public evidentiary hearings, which is what our ORS does. So to some extent, I just don't know. I'm not objecting to the idea of the commission using performance measures, but I am suggesting that Arkansas may not be the best starting point to do this, because those MFRs at Arkansas are more like the discovery requests that we get in a rate case from ORS. And then to go back, they have two water utilities which are affiliated, Liberty Utilities and United Water of Arkansas, and in 2021 at least, their last water rate case was in 2006. So we don't really have a lot of track record on whether these things were useful or not. I think you kind of need to look within. Reporting for the sake of reporting, I just don't, is really just not going to be useful to anybody.
Understood. Thank you for that. I mean, that's helpful to know, and I think that's a good point that, yeah, we don't want to have just people doing work for no reason, basically, right?
And I'll elaborate on this. I'm remembering it now. In that rate case in 2006, the application had 251 pages of publicly available exhibits. So this MFR, using those MFRs, I don't think is going to get you where you want. I mean, we probably have 251 pages of exhibits that are furnished to ORS, and they are to some extent publicly available unless they're confidential. But I don't think, and the Arkansas Consumer Advocate said, quote, applications are confusing to most customers due to the length of the filings and the complicated tables and charts that accompany them. If we're going to do this, let's find something that's useful. We report the number of SSOs, for instance, sanitary sewer overflows, or we report consent orders to the commission already. I don't think these operational details are really going to get you where you want. But let's talk. Yeah, please.
I'll keep my additional comment short. One thing that John, and thank you for your comment, John. I appreciate it because it got me thinking. Okay, trying to put myself in the position of the commission and the commission staff, and I heard the words, hey, inquiries from the public, legislators, others. It's one thought that occurs to me is, generally the commission will hear in a rate case, hey, usually through testimony from ORS, but what are the number of complaints that have been received about a utility regarding billing over a 12-month period? John, is that what you're kind of wanting to put out in the public forum, so that if I'm a member, if I'm a legislator and I want to go to the commission website and I look, who are the regulated utilities, and I just see, hey, over the last 12-month period, there's been 50 complaints against consumer complaints with Y utility. 50% of the complaints resolved were around billing, 10% were on service quality. Is that kind of what you're aiming for?
Well, that wouldn't be the only thing. But
is it an illustrative example?
Yeah. I think F, one of the F for customer satisfaction, it would be one of the things that I think the public would be interested in a performance measure. How many customer complaints are there?
And how they were found by ORS,
and were they resolved?
Were they resolved, or did they have merit? I guarantee you that some of these companies are going to come in for a rate case, and there will be 100 customer complaints. if this is why, you know, if people don't want their rates increased. Let's be frank about it. If that's going to be publicly reported, somebody's going to figure it out. They're going to file 100 complaints with the ORS. That's fine. But if the commission's going to consider them, I think it's important if ORS reports, you know, yeah, well, we had 100 complaints, 99 of them didn't have any merit.
Yeah, and that's why this has to be a collaborative effort, because
Well,
yeah, you're right. It can't just be customer complaints. There also has to be other line items attached to that, you know, caveats.
And that also goes to timing, because you know, you were looking at, I mean, Charlie, your point, if they all came in the day after the application for the rate case was, you see where that's a timing issue. But I mean, it is helpful for me at least to understand what you're thinking and where you're, you know, where you're coming from, which is data points that the public would find helpful. That's really where you're going. Because in a rate case, you get long hearings in rate cases. But what you're looking for is data points that the public or the consumers would find helpful. And then if you get that call, if your public information office gets a phone call, you can steer and say, here's those data points wherever they're housed. It might be your website, it might be ORS's website, wherever.
Right. Yeah, I think that's fair. Yeah, I think, you know, really this is to, you know, have the water and wastewater companies be not more transparent, but, you know, for the PSC to be able to, you know, broadcast, I think, you know, public information that I think, like you said, the public finds useful.
And I know I'm going to probably end up asking ORS this question. So I know there's something to do with fire hydrants, and I can't remember what it is, but we wouldn't get insurance reports, would we, regarding fire services? I don't really follow that one, I'll be honest. I'm just going to throw it out there. Most recent report from insurance service offices, public fire protection.
And I will say too, like we're not married to these specific indicators. The point really of picking this specific schedule was mainly that it has been in other dockets and that parties had seen it before, and it is you know, relevant to the conversation. You know, this isn't. We didn't go through hundreds of dockets and determine that this was our favorite. You know, it was more so that it's been seen before. And yeah, you know, I think that, you know, Arkansas is very different. We'd love to hear if you have any other jurisdictions that you think are more aligned with us in any way that would be worth like our consideration. Which, yeah, I don't know if you know off the top of your head, but this could also be in the docket in the future. I think that would be helpful for us to hear about ever if there's something that is out there.
We'll be glad to file some follow-up comments.
That'd be great. Yeah. And you know, as this process moves forward, there would be other workshops too. You know, more discussions. This isn't it. You know, you're not going to get proposed reg changes tomorrow, right? So.
No, I mean, we want to be helpful. We'll be glad to file some. We'll even run them by ORS and DCA.
Cool. Well, yeah, we'd appreciate that. Speaking of which, does ORS or DCA have anything to say on any of these matters? Just want to give you the opportunity.
I was able to pull up from our prior filings, and I think I'm on the same page of what everybody's looking at there. And I guess to the extent that our initial comments sort of triggered some of this, like I said before, I think what we were really looking for originally was more of those financial type metrics that go in a rate case. Maybe some of these might be something we would occasionally ask for in discovery. I don't know that it was what we intended by minimum filing requirements as far as this particular schedule here in the Arkansas document. I mean, I think could be beneficial for a comparison to see some of this information for different utilities. Yes, for our purposes in a rate case, you know, maybe even, but I don't think it's something that, again, going to Charlie's point about additional costs and time for the utilities that we would push. I did wonder, if any of these things are reported to DHEC already, I assume, or at least it seems like at least some of these would be involved in an initial permit for a water treatment facility or a wastewater treatment facility. I think we're going back to, like, again, what the commission regulations said, if we're looking at general, we're trying to get a little more specific, I suppose, on reporting requirements, on quality of service. To me, like performance and quality of service, as I'm trying to think through more specific examples, I was thinking more things of like overflows, boil water advisories, odor complaints, interruptions of service, DHEC violations, those types of metrics, rather than, again, sort of peak month usage or gallons per customer and some of the other things that were in the Arkansas. So mine would go more towards, I guess, a quality of service, not just a sort of amounts of service. But I didn't know if maybe Lauren would know the types of things they might report to DHEC, or if it's all just an initial permit. But other than that, like, again, appreciate the conversation, and just whether it was driven by DCA, I don't think these in the schedule, what is it, E12 that y'all are looking at is necessarily what we envision.
No, thank you. That's helpful. And I would reiterate too, if you ever feel like it would be helpful for us to get any written commentary from you guys at DCA about the types of things that you're looking for, like the boil water, the leaks, that sort of thing. Just so that we do know in advance kind of what you might be interested in and what you're maybe not interested in. But yeah, I mean, I think there's potential to sort of align with maybe the DHEC reporting, although I don't truly know what you guys do on that front. So yeah, there would have to be more discussions there, I think.
And I know there is reporting to the PSC on some of these issues. I think there are like interruptions of service. I think there's a sort of a time frame. And again, I don't know if Charlie or Lauren or Annette would know that, but I don't think y'all are reporting every interruption of service, right? Are you not reporting necessarily every overflow or every boil water advisory, are you? Or can y'all speak to what you already are reporting?
Interruptions of service over 6 hours are reported. DHEC violations that lead to an order or a consent order are reported. And we've made several this year. I'm sure there are others. Do you remember what else we reported? I think I listed them in the letter.
I would have to check on the DES stuff. I know it's all done in the permit renewals, but I don't know if it's a periodic thing.
Yeah, the interruption of service is what comes to mind. With DHEC, there are some reports with DHEC, but I mean, DHEC's enforcement, I would point out, and I'll just say I was at the commission when we came up with the regulation on the reporting the consent orders. And DHEC's enforcement is at such a granular level that, if you had every exceedance, I mean, most of them don't even result in a fine or anything. It's just kind of like, this happened, we move on. So that's how we settled on the consent orders, which are, where something significant happens, they maybe fine you, but they tell you got to do something about it, and you do it. And I think that was probably a useful data point. Maybe we could consolidate those into the annual report.
Yeah, I think that there could be some value in consolidation, and getting back to even the rate case thing. Like, yeah, the information may come to light, but you have to rely on maybe ORS to do it in discovery, or maybe a commissioner to ask a question or something like that, whereas if it was consolidated in a sort of consistent way, it might be easier for people, including us as staff, to sort of know where some of this stuff is, I guess. Mm-hmm. It gets very confusing. So
it also points you back, though, to our point about why this really needs to be done on an individual level. And I'll give you two very specific examples. 40 Love Point with Blue Granite Water, then Carolina Water Service. They had constant complaints about brown water, and what was going on was there was manganese in the well water, and it was creating problems. Some of it was on our side, some of it was on the on the homeowner side because they had filtration equipment and things that weren't working, but we were constantly having to deal with it. And the fix to it ultimately was an interconnection with a water main the city of Columbia had that was some distance away. Now, that required a bunch of capital, which we eventually invested and were able to invest because of a consolidation in the utility. But that situation, and I'll point out, DHEC never said there was anything wrong with the water. It was just like going to the beach when you were little, you know, and the water smelled, and you didn't want to drink the Kool-Aid, or if you were a kid, or the coffee if you were an adult. And now when I go to the beach, the water's great, but it costs like 10 times as much because they put a reverse osmosis system in for the city. And we were kind of in the same deal. It was a cost efficiency basis, and eventually the commission said, you know, okay, if this is what you want to do, and it'll help the residents, cost recovery is appropriate, and we got together with the residents and figured this out. TGK Utilities, horrible problems at TGK Utilities, since been sold to I think the city of TGK. But we probably, it was an old system with ceramic pipes that was built in a bowl around a lake. I mean, nobody in their right mind would ever do this. And our utility, by the way, didn't do it. You know, they bought this system at the request of the commission in the early 80s. And so they were dealing with these constant SSOs. And at a certain point, we had to come to the commission. We did an allowable ex parte and said, yeah, we're going to deal with this, but commission, you need to understand, we're going to put $6 million in this system in the next year. And that's what we did, and it was a partial fix. So, you know, reacting to either one of these, a rational response might have been, no, don't do it. You know, the rates are already too high, and the customers would rather put up with the brown water. Or, you know, so that's why I think every one of these circumstances needs to be evaluated on a specific basis. And I'll quit monopolizing the conversation, but we are the only utility here, so, I mean.
Yeah, no, we want to hear from you. And I mean, yeah, you know, point taken definitely. There are different systems with very different needs, potentially. So that would be something certainly that we will consider. Anything? ORS, would you like to say anything?
No, thank you.
Sorry, who was that?
This is Chad Torrey. No thanks.
Okay, thank you. Well, with that, I mean, that's sort of my list of questions. I think this was a good start to the conversation for sure. And again, we do want this to continue to be collaborative, and we're not out to get anybody, right? We just want it to be fair and keep talking about it in this way. So thank you everybody for coming in. We really appreciate you know, what we were able to learn today. And yeah, if anything that happens, you know, everybody will be updated appropriately in the docket and served electronically and all that good stuff. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.